want their bill characterized as something that was only to save Jewish Holocaust survivors. The bill that's first proposed in 1947 is the Stratton Bill. It's put forward by the CC DP, and it calls for putting DPs outside of the quota system. Visas are for various skills, including needle skills, and they were going to define people in this area as those who have we're going to define DPs as those who have entered the U.S. controlled zone by April of 1947. Be careful. Well, this turned out to be a big mistake, putting it outside of the quota system. They were careful not to call it immigration reform. They were trying to make this bill look like just an emergency, let's say a humanitarian measure. But by going outside of the quota system, that turned out to be difficult. McCarran and Revercombe, whom we'll hear, especially McCarran later, these are the opposition. And they initially killed the bill by simply not letting it escape committee. But in the following year, there was so much pressure to do something about it. Just imagine what was in the newspapers. That they came back in 1948 with the McCarran-Revercombe DP Act, which was meant to look like a humanitarian act, but was meant to do nothing, especially it was meant not to let Jews in. So instead of going around the quota system, they mortgaged quota slots. And when we say, quote, mortgaged slots, the idea was that, well, if there aren't enough quota slots in 1948, you can use one from 1949, or 50, 51, or 60, and so on. There was a preference for agricultural workers, which again was not favorable to the Jews. And this was a particularly important one. By reducing to 1945, by moving the period earlier, this effectively eliminated a lot of Holocaust survivors getting into U.S. controlled zones. The problem politically, however, was that 1945 cutoff, which was intended to limit Jewish eligibility, also limited the number of refugees from communist countries that were going to be able to immigrate under the DP Act, and that gave an opening to the other side. So they came back and amended the 1950 DP Act to move the date now even further forward to 1949, removing the agricultural bias and increasing the levels to 400, back to 400,000. So ultimately, by 1950, we're back essentially to the Stratton Bill. So we see a little toing and froing between the isolationist, I should say the restrictionist Cold Warriors, and the expansionist Cold Warriors, if you will. But ultimately, the argument that moved the day was not humanitarian, but rather this problem that the way the original bill was constructed, they were refugees from communism, from communist countries that were not going to be allowed out. This mortgaging continued, and so under the 1950 Act, some countries had their quotas mortgaged well into the 22nd century, which is, again, typical of these immigration acts. The words start to mean less and less when another act comes along. This allowed, I guess, politicians to say we haven't damaged the quota system at all, we simply mortgaged it. But what does it mean? Okay, after losing the battle on the DP Act, the restrictionists, I'm using the word restrictionist, but really these are restrictionist Cold Warriors. Okay, let's use it. They change tactics and start to introduce legislation about security. And the high watermark for them is the McCarran Internal Security Act of 1950. And this is really breathtaking in its scope. It calls for the registration of communist organizations with the Attorney General. Think about that. It created a subversive activities control board, which was supposed to monitor, you guessed it, subversive activities. It called for the exclusion of aliens who were once communists or members of front organizations. And here again, the Attorney General was going to have a large say in defining what a front organization is. And deportation of any non-citizen who belonged to the Communist Party or engaged in acts subversive to the national security. Under this, even a citizen, a naturalized citizen, could be denaturalized. You could actually lose citizenship. This is quite rare. This is the only law I know of that passed that allowed this other than the Cable Act, which allowed for the loss of, it's not denaturalization, it was the loss of citizenship of a woman who married an alien ineligible for citizenship. So this is really quite far-reaching, and it says quite a lot about the mood at the time. Truman vetoed this, and yet it was overridden by a Congress of his own party, by the Democratic Party. Fortunately, most of this was eventually ruled unconstitutional by the Supreme Court. So not much of this is still in effect. I don't think any of these, we don't have a subversive activities control board, and communist organizations don't need to register. So none of the important bits of this act survived legal scrutiny. Oops. Let's see. 2 years later, in 1952, immigration reform finally became a live issue. And the motive for it was indeed to get rid of the, it was to soften the nationalities quota. Again, the first bill in 1952, which was proposed by Hubert Humphrey, I forgot Lincoln's first name, James Roosevelt, they would have taken the 1920s Act and they would have rationalized it in simple ways. First, by using the 1950s quota, the 1950s census, and simply looking at place of birth rather than the goofy national origin system that James Hill devised for the 1924 Act. They were going to use place of birth even for Asians. That was a real innovation. Recall that at this time, and going forward, Asians are considered not a nationality but a race. Right? So that a person born of Chinese parents in Canada is considered Chinese and ineligible, or at this point ineligible for, no longer ineligible for citizenship, but not Canadian nonetheless. So we have to come in under the very small Chinese quota of 105 at this time. Right? So the Humphrey-Lehman-Roosevelt bill would have undone that. So they're finally reaching that topic for the first time. They're saying that we're going to treat Asians just like any other nationality. So this is again, the overtones of equality and the importance of appearing to be equal for Cold War propaganda purposes. Not out of place here. They raised the quota somewhat. Remember, the quota was about 157,000. At this point, the official quota would be raised to 214,000. Not a big deal. Originally, we're going to impose quotas on the Western Hemisphere, countries in the Western Hemisphere, Mexico and Canada and so forth, under the same system. But that was amended away for the same sorts of reasons that it's always amended away in legislation at this time. And the other quite important and surprising thing is that they're going to pool unused quotas and use those for refugees. This is the first time anyone, I think this is the first time any legislation has been proposed to designate a category called refugees. So this is the first time we're actually looking at handling refugees in a legislative way instead of a very ad hoc way, which is what is going to happen all the way until 1980, and then after 1980 as well. Right. McCarran and Walter want nothing to do with this bill. McCarran against Patrick McCarran. He is the very powerful Republican from Nevada who was responsible for the Internal Security Act and the McCarran-Rutherford bill that we saw before. The McCarran-Walter bill is proposed as a counter-proposal to the Humphrey-Lehman-Roosevelt bill, and their idea here is to make something that looks like reform but really isn't. Right. They're out to very much to preserve the quota system, and they're out to preserve national homogeneity. During the debate, an Idaho senator foolishly went so far as to say, quote, "On the question of racial origins, though I'm not a follower of Hitler, there's something to it. We cannot tie a stone around its neck and drop it in the middle of the Atlantic just because it worked to the contrary in Germany." But that was a lone voice. And for the most part, at this point in time, you couldn't say stuff like that. That was the McCarran-Walter bill has to seem, it has to be tricky, and it is. It's very much designed to look like one thing and do something else. It's designed to look like reform, but it's designed to maintain the status quo. So there's a preference system based on skill and family reunification. Fine, that was in the Humphrey-Lehman bill to some extent. It was hinted at in any case, but it's within the existing quotas. So we're not changing the existing quotas at all. We're going to abolish the Asian Barred Zone completely. That looks like reform. And they're going to replace those with quotas for all nations. Right? That does look a lot like reform, but those quotas are going to be very, very small, as we'll see. And since they saw this as something they were not going to be able to stop anyway, having seen the Chinese Exclusion Act repealed and naturalization repealed, they're also willing to abolish the bars to naturalization based on race. So taken together, this looks a lot like reform. But in their minds, or in their intent, this was purely symbolic. Because by keeping the quotas small, they were going to be able to say, look, we're welcoming Asians now. Yet, in fact, they wouldn't welcome very many. Now, you could strangely argue here that if they had used, even though the quotas that they're going to come up with are small, they're actually larger than we would have gotten if you had used James Hill's approach in 1929. Because the U.S. population in 1790 of Asians was very, very small. So, in some sense, there was room for a kind of argument, although I don't know. Of course, because it's a McCarran bill, it was going to exclude 32 kinds of subversives. Among those would be, of course, homosexuals and epileptics, people like that who are, of course, a great threat to the nation. We'll skip the quote and look exactly at what the bill that finally came out. McCarran and Walter were far better politicians at this time than Humphrey, Lehman, and Roosevelt. They had much more seniority and a lot more street smarts about the Senate. So they managed to wrap the bills together and work it out so that the only hearings on the bill would be conducted by Pat McCarran, and somehow only people who approved it, who were in favor of his ideas, were able to speak at these hearings. So what came out was finally this curious mix, very much like what we just went through, but there are a couple of important things to note. The nationality quota system is preserved. Tiny quota for Asians, we just said. The racial bars were abolished and added preferences. So these things we looked at before. These are the ones we just talked about. These are the ones that were proposed on the previous slide. It also maintained the non-quota status for immigrants from independent Western Hemisphere nations. Again, that always seems to happen now. The reason is because, of course, the Southern and Western agricultural interests were powerful in the Senate, insist on this. And after the experience during the Depression, the idea that Mexicans were a docile workforce who could easily be sent home, it had some currency. The bill imposed penalties for harboring illegal immigrants, but at the same time, it defined employment as not harboring. In other words, it excluded the idea of, if you helped an illegal immigrant, you were in trouble, but if you gave him a job, that was not a problem. Right? This is called the Texas Proviso, and it's just a classic piece of the sausage of legislation. So there are penalties for harboring illegal immigrants, but not really. And finally, exempted spouses and minor children from the quotas. These two pieces that are underlined would go a long way to make for much more immigration than the bill intended. And as you said, provided for exclusion and deportation of lots and lots of subversives, anybody who engaged in activities prejudicial to the public interest, subversive to national security, like mental retardation, epilepsy, homosexuality. Let's take a quick look then at the consequences for Asians, which I think are quite important. As I hinted at before, it still maintains severe limitations on people from the so-called Asian-Pacific Triangle, but it did it by quota, parallel to the way these restrictions were placed on any other country. And as they claimed, the 100 per country exceeded the 0.16% of what they would have come up with in the 1920 Origin Act. There were some exceptions. Japan got 185. China got 105 in this act, as well as 105 they got from the Chinese Exclusion Act. I think the Philippines got 100 now, so their quota doubled. Again, funny games are played with this. Why these different countries get different minuscule numbers is very difficult to understand. But this piece, Asians born outside of the triangle counted as 1/2 against the national quota. What does that mean? Again, we're talking about people who were maybe born of Chinese or Japanese parents, but in Canada, if they enter, they're going to count 1/2 against the Chinese or Japanese quota. So again, they're not seen yet as, it's not a nationality. It's still a race, but perhaps it's only half a race. Just another example of strange things that are happening in the Cold War. This is a very odd compromise, hard to make a lot of sense of it, but we can see in it that there's this pressure. It is recognized now that this unequal treatment of Asians is somehow a race rather than a nationality is at least up for discussion. Another unintended consequence of the McCarran-Walter Act, by the way, is that it did away with it neutralized the land acts. The Webb Act, for example, that prohibited aliens ineligible for citizenship from owning land. In that case, they were largely Japanese. Well, there were no aliens ineligible for citizenship anymore after this. Okay, when we stop here, we'll finish up through the civil rights movement on Wednesday and the Reagan and Carter era on Friday.